good. Okay, so let's get going. Thanks everybody for coming. I want to give thanks to our Aboriginal brothers and sisters for being on Treaty 6 territory, also homeland to the Métis. My name's Marcus Miller, director here at the Gordon Snellgrove Gallery. I'm not going to say very much except to plug a few upcoming events. This show, Leftovers, has its reception tomorrow night, Friday night. All the food, I'm told, is going to be served in Tupperware containers. Next week, this is the second in an ongoing series of MFA talks. So next week it's Zoe Schneider, every Thursday until February 15th. And one more talk next week that's on an unusual time on Wednesday. Brenda Francis Pelkey will be here from 2 till 4. We've got a panel in the gallery, and it's also on the occasion of Black Flash Magazine's 35th anniversary, and there's going to be a magazine launching for that. And there'll be a discussion. It's called 35 Years Looking Forward, Looking Back, and there are a few people on the panel with Brenda who will discuss, the formation of artist-run centers here and Black Flash Magazine. So now I'd like to hand the mic over to Negar Tajgardan, and she's going to be interviewing Aaron Baugh.
Thanks, Marcus. Today I'm here to introduce Aaron Baugh. He's a prolific drawer with affinity in literature and philosophy. He studied at Redeemer University College, Ancaster, Ontario, and he majored in fine art and minored in philosophy, and he started his MFA here in 2016. Let's give a warm welcome to Aaron.
Thank you. Thank you for the warm welcome.
Aaron, can you talk about your original intention when you entered this program?
Yeah, I mean, I had an idea off the get-go that kind of show a sense of dynamism. What I mean by dynamism is basically that things shift in a sort of stage-like way, the idea of series. Like Duchamp talked about this idea that when you have one thing, it's unity. Two things, there's a comparison, that you naturally compare things in twos. When you get three things, then you start to get the beginning of a series. And I mean, if you're trying to show movement and energy through a visual format, that's one of the main ways you can access that. So I was interested in Piet Mondrian's kind of the way, as you kind of follow his work through his life, how it sort of morphs and changes, and he becomes more interested in the line work itself and the physicality of the medium in comparison to kind of transporting you to a different reality. He's focusing on the shapes that go to making up the whole image. So I thought that was really interesting in this dynamic aspect. And being a chess player, I'm always interested in calculating the possibilities. There's kind of when you start looking at a position, there's a lot of dynamism in a position. That there's a lot of you play a move, but that doesn't really get at the heart of all the moves that are available in the position. So I'm kind of interested in the idea of other possible worlds where you try something different. So in this particular case, I started with quick charcoal drawing, give myself 5 or 10 minutes, and then as I went through, I had some color and. There's a few different stages of this process here, and I ended with something. So it's taking some kind of inanimate objects and showing how they can transform and change. And you end up picking one particular permutation of what the possibilities could have been. That's the interesting thing about working in a series, is that it's the weird game of telephone, and one of those particularities gets put through. And so, I was very interested in doing that. But after doing a little bit of this, I realized I have more to say with drawing. That there's more freedom. There's more of a dance between the eye and the hand. I got a lot of things to say, and I want to say them as soon as possible. And I find that for me, that painting was breaking up my sort of stream of consciousness that was going on.
I know you have a lot of you draw on a lot of a sketchbook. And I have two of them with me. I can pass them. Marcus, can you pass them to two people if they
Maybe
want
go
to.
one on each side or something.
Yeah. Can you explain about your relationship to this sketchbook?
Well, it's going to sound a little bit like an infomercial, but I'm going to go ahead. So, the nice thing with the sketchbooks, A, it's very portable. You can take it wherever you go. If you're traveling to like Europe or whatever, you've got to pack light. You can't bring a big thing and like work on it. You've got to be really practical. And so there's a practicality to it that I really like. But because of that practicality, you can take it with you to places. Like say you go on a hike and you're eating like lunch and you bust out your sketchbook and then you're drawing in that sketchbook and it's like, by recording the environment, it gives this imbued sense of meaning. Like people around you, there's kind of this feel that something's being recorded. And when something's being recorded, people have a heightened attention to what's going on. Like, and I noticed there's an interesting correlation to journaling as well. That when you get in the habit of writing down, even on a weekly basis, and write down things that happen, pay attention to them, things some people said, ideas that go through your mind, like things that happen on a day-to-day basis. It has this effect of making you pay more attention to those things, and then you have more things to write about. So it has this way of they build on each other. There's a synergy that happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, the other thing is it shows progress, so you can see like dynamically how far you've come since you begun. If you keep track of all the sketchbooks, then you can kind of see where you were and where you are now, and what kind of things are interesting and how your interests change.
So it's kind of like you see the process of your life, and also you see the process of your art in the sketchbook.
Absolutely, and you can pinpoint, hey, I remember exactly that thing because I had to sketch it. I sketched it for half an hour, and then it kind of like opens up that whole experience again. You look at the sketch and you say, hey, there's something interesting going on there, and I remember that whole experience now. So it's a image-based journal in some ways.
Interesting. Talking about process, do you think your process changed when you take your master here?
Yeah, it changed. I think I tried to open myself up to more spontaneity. Instead of doing all my play in sketchbooks, I tried to play on a larger scale. So that's been one attempt, just to open up my realm of play to a larger scale, and the movement from sitting down and working like this to working. So I don't use the sketchbook as much as a preparatory kind of linear kind of this to this to this. You get a small sketchbook, then you get a bigger piece, and then you work on a larger painting, and it's kind of the idea of a finished product. Now it's like I'm trying to learn to play and open myself up to spontaneity in the moment as I'm working. Yeah.
Okay. How did you arrive at Joyne's Finnegan's Wake?
All right, now we got my pet subject here. Okay, so to talk about Finnegan's Wake, I'm going to have to start with some of his more simple novels. I mean, to properly get into Joyce, it really helps to have no job or any foreseeable one in the future. Yeah, so yeah, I was tree planting for many years, so I had a lot of free time. So he's a hard guy to get into if you got a 9-to-5, that's for sure. So I'll start with Portrait of an Artist. Maybe some of you guys have read it. Have any of you guys read Portrait of an Artist? Fantastic. It's a really good book. The really cool thing about Portrait of an Artist, it kind of gets into the subjective stance. So it's kind of autobiographical, kind of his experience as a kid, from what I can tell. And the cool thing is that on the left-hand side you can see that the writing is fairly simplistic. It starts off kind of writing like a kid. The moo cow came down the road where Betty Byrne lived. She sold lemon plaid. When you wet the bed, first it is warm and then it gets cold. There you go. Very simple form of description. And then you go to the right and it's like, same book. At the end of the book, there's a maturation that happens to the point where he's writing incredibly abstract, beautiful, poetic kind of synergy between descriptive elements and like poetic language, that it's just like a soft liquid joy, like the noise of many waters flowed over his memory, and he felt in his heart the soft peace of silent spaces. So he's got an incredible gift for poetic, for word usage, understanding how a word sounds and what it means, and using those two together. I mean, it just shows his incredible depth. This is where this was one of his first hit one of his first hits. I think it was either before or after Dubliners, maybe after. I'm not sure, but so then when you get into Ulysses, and I use the term alchemy because, man, he really tests the reader. I mean, he puts you through some somersaults for this. So basically, Ulysses is 18 hours. I think the 18 chapters relate to the 18 hours of a day. The particular day, 722 pages. And each chapter is linked to a particular environment that they're in. So instead of it being the subjectivity from Portrait of an Artist, now you have the environmental speaking into the situation. So in these particular chapters, for instance, on the left, it's kind of got the question and answer, the dialectical. What did Bloom see in the range? On the right, Hob a blue enameled saucepan. On the left, Hob. So very descriptive, right? On the left side. And he goes into some sweet intricacies, like from round wood reservoir in Count Wicklow of a cubic capacity of 2,400 million gallons. Like, you get the sense that he actually researches stuff. Like, he's basically going to the theme of technically correct is the only kind of correct. Because he's trying to paint a description, literally, of what Dublin was like on a particular day of 1904, June 16th, I believe, in Dublin, Ireland, which from the point of view of two characters. And on the right, you have a whole chapter that's written with accordance to the theme of, well, what if you didn't know going into the chapter that, or like, what if we played with the idea that your thoughts, hopes, fears are built into your experiential setting? And he does it by giving it like a play, like a theatrical presence. And so everything's dictated to you, and you don't actually know what's actually happening in that particular part of the story, and what's just conjecture, what's their hopes and dreams and thoughts, what's kind of the possible, like what's within the possible realm of the character. The other cool thing about Ulysses is he's having a strange juxtaposition to ancient times. He's with the Odyssey, they're dealing with heroic themes of wit, of kind of trickery, of heroism. These kind of big ancient themes, the kind of things that they had to enforce in those ancient times to have society run properly. And now, but it's strongly juxtaposed to Ulysses, which is basically close-up, a very specific close-up of the individual and the moment and the particular surroundings of a particular time. Instead of being vague and long ago, it's dealing with societal pressures like bigotry and so forth. Like, it's just dealing with the kind of modern, so it's seen as one of the first modern pieces of literature. So I thought this is something that really opened my mind up to kind of classical form of beauty. Instead of like the romantic, like you just see the beauty. I feel like in the last one it's kind of romantic beauty in that you see the beauty on the page and it's immediately beautiful. It's kind of unfiltered. This way it's like you pick it apart and you can start to see the way that the parts orient to the whole and synergize to make this whole picture of that particular day. So that's all right. Now we have Finnegan's Wake. So Finnegan's Wake, once you start reading Finnegan's Wake, you think, oh man, that was so linear in Ulysses. You come to this and it's like he's put languages through a blender and he's basically like, here you go. Like, he's taken all kinds of different cultic rituals, all kinds of different aspects of human lived existence from many different cultures, and he's blended it in the text here. And it's basically, the premise is a family of 5 people are co-dreaming the repetitive fall and rise of human civilization. That's the basic premise, but in dealing with the dreamscape, you're dealing with the fog, the non-linear way of describing things that are happening. So sometimes it's a little more lucid, and it goes in and out of being totally confusing and totally lucid. So what I did was, for my artwork, for this particular one, I wanted to do 2 things. I wanted to somehow try to represent Joyce somehow, and just take a stab at it, you know. And the other thing is I want to actually read it, and this was a way of kind of having these pieces synergized together for me. That now I would take 2 pages and do a drawing about it, and take another 2 pages and do a drawing about it, and that helped me read it and make some art at the same time. So it was kind of, so I would take little parts of the book, underline them perhaps, as parts that I found like I could maybe understand a little bit. And that's the way I had to do it, because you have to be incredibly selective with this novel. You can't try to understand all of it. That's a myth you have to chuck out of your head very, very quickly. There's no singular interpretation of this book, not even close. So you get to points like subsequent ages of our democracy. You get ideas of democracy, there's subsequent ages, all right, there's time-oriented with the subsequent. It feels like a key to unlocking a bigger piece. Or you do a diagonals, there's Lamplick. Well, I'm a chess player, so of course I brought in some diagonal-oriented bishops to this particular drawing. So this one is kind of goes down the rabbit hole too. It's like you've got this is basically the breakdown of creation, and on the left, the big thing that I've circled. Quick lunch by our left, wheel to where along Levias Lane. So these are actually people through history. Berkeley, Brock, Arezzo, Gainsborough. These are people with different orientations. There's, I think, a metaphysician. There's like a couple artists, a writer, like, and it's kind of showing that like he's kind of bringing you through into the scene. And he does this with all the beginning of each chapter, that he brings you into the scene. You know, here's the particular scene. Here's where we are right now. That's basically what he's saying. But he's talking about creation myth. So this one, there's you can go really far down the rabbit hole. I'm going to spare you guys some of this, but yeah. So that's what I was trying to wrestle with. Basically, that like this character on the right is kind of the macroprosopos. He's the kind of, which I think was from the Kabbalah. But he was one of these creator gods that has like 13 strands of beard that are kind of like the 13 graces and mercies. And there's a lot of this is broken down in this other book that helps you read the narrative. And the other thing cool about these is that there's commentary on the lefts and rights of the page. So there's kind of the very proper, almost Latin-like on the one side, and the other side is very cheeky and kind of like more Irish slang, more just like playing with language. Yeah, so I literally for this one on the right side of the page, that circle with the asterisks, that's basically what it bases this whole drawing around. 4 centers of the fire serpentine: heart, throat, navel, spleen, sacral, fontanella, intertemporal eye. I just basically said, all right, this is what I'm drawing here. And trying to mix text in there and playing around with that. All right, so yeah, some of these, I worked on some bigger pieces which conglomerated, trying to understand the wake through several drawings. So there's an element of planned in this one. It wasn't just a series of separate drawings. This is sort of, as you go through this is kind of I was kind of responding to the pages as they were coming to me. So there's kind of a randomness, but I was trying to link the theme of consumption, connectivity, and like there's a connection going on through the entire thing. It's kind of the blood flow. And in this chapter, there's kind of like there's a bartender, and the people are eating and drinking. And as you discover through the chapter, they're eating and drinking his reputation. They're bringing him down, and that's one of the meta themes to the wake is that sometimes people, all great people, kind of get reduced to rubble through time. That you find something wrong with them, and they all get reduced to rubble. All people that are renowned for things, for greatness, and yet we need the great men or great people, but eventually their reputation will fall apart. And it could be many different versions of the same story. You know, it's yeah. Covered most of that.
I think it's also interesting that you can see the process of your work here. Is that right?
Yeah. I like to take a bunch of pictures as I go. It helps me critically understand where I may have made mistakes, where I had the best version of the possible form of the piece. I think it's important practice.
Yeah.
There's some close-ups where I try to involve text. There's text in all these pages. In the right text, I try to literally write down what they're talking about in some of this.
I also find it interesting that earlier we were talking that the story is like people co-dreaming in the book, and I can see in your work that because the objects are kind of floating, it's kind of showing the dreams and
Kind of ethereal, hey?
yeah.
It's a little bit removed from, there's no clear ground. It's kind of, they're all floating pieces of the imagination to some extent. There's a little bit of like a watery thing at the top, or the watery leveling point, but a lot of it is sort of floating. It's in some sense diagrammatic. I tried to have a dreaming image in the lower right. I don't know if it's visible, but there's a receding female figure who's dreaming, and she becomes more and more vague as you go. And this is, on the left, I took the propeller and did the four stages of the digestive tract. That's what I went for here. Okay.
Yeah. I know that there's some the idea of games in some of your works. Can you speak a little about that?
Yeah, well, as I talked before, I'm a big chess fanatic kind of thing. Here's the Lasker brothers. There's a woodcut. Basically, I grew up playing games. I grew up like with a very tight knit, like our next door neighbors, like between the years of 84 to 89, there was like a male child born for like 6 years straight, right? So we always had people to play with, play board games with, and so forth. And yeah, like we would like make adaptations from like we would make our own swords and make swords and shields and kind of fight and kind of mimic what we were playing on the computer. And of course, we weren't like always so good with our craft, and like there would be a nail sticking out, and sometimes the kid would be crying, and mom would run outside and sort of try to calm the commotion. But yeah, I got seriously into board games, I guess, a little bit later. I remember in my early teenage years, especially, I got really into chess. I would start studying. Like I would start like kind of play testing. I was pretty good at playing by myself, and then like somewhere in my teenage years, I started taking chess more seriously because I was just curious. I had to know, the openings or whatever, and I just studied. I remember I would come home from high school and look over these game anthologies and go through a bunch of different games and before supper time. And so I was used to kind of play testing different, and I find that games has become a useful metaphor for me because, I guess you could use the word experimentation, but for me, with a game, you have a very finite set of rules, and you have a way of trying to accomplish the goal. And in a game, you're kind of trying to use your creativity within that fixed area, within that cage, if you will, to achieve that goal. And so what we sometimes do as artists is we try to make for ourselves our own cages so we make for ourselves little games in some extent. So I find that it's a useful analogy. And, when I think philosophically, like, we can't capture talking, like we can't try to talk about all of reality. We always have to be specific in what we talk about because we're finite, man. We don't see the whole picture. So we have to sometimes frame things. We have to define things. We have to give things that are particular place so we can talk about them. We need a format. We need the ground to walk on in order to talk about these things.
I also find it like, as a viewer, it's kind of like solving a puzzle, or at least trying to solve a puzzle when you look at when looking at your work, kind of.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's enough. Yeah, I love puzzles. That's why I kind of got into Joyce, because people were like, "This, you can't, read this, or you shouldn't read this," and I'm like, "Well, now you have my attention. Now I have to. Now I have to try." Yeah. So. I love puzzles. I love things that I don't understand immediately. So yeah, with this one, here's some close-ups. This is, again, dealing with maturation and being instantiated in physical reality. Different aspects of chess. The blunders, the great players. You got Karpov and Magnus Carlsen on the right. And these guys were known for their kind of vice-like strategy of just taking away all the fun of the position. On the left, we got blunders. fact that time's a reality and that you will only have so much time to think. And so blunders happen. So yeah. And then yeah, just different historical aspects and parts of the whole picture. Trying to render a consciousness. Which has been an interesting challenge. Oh wait, that's nice.
Okay, can you elaborate more on the project that you did last summer and the process of making it?
Yeah, with the summer project, it was a conglomeration of a lot of sketchbook pieces that I just put together and tried to, I just tried to marry a bunch of different drawings that are kind of totally unrelated. But in the process of doing that, I was like, it made me answer certain formal questions. Just like, how do you, like, there's all kinds of different themes going on in this. Like, there's like elements of tree planting. There's like things which I'm seeing, like this is like a drawing from last year where like you're in a surreal landscape and people with tongue heads are reaching for fruit from tongue trees. You've got shovels and madness, sort of the psychological landscape on the right. And there's just a whole conflagration of different, it's like I was trying to show the many different variations of what I can do with drawing, especially with pen, and what I can do with the visual language, essentially. And what would happen if I put a bunch of drawings together like this, just sort of, and making this formal aspect dictate a lot of the accidents, a lot of the accidental realities and the ways these things are married together. When you just think strictly formally, how do I want to bring these together? I kind of try to get it like automatic. Try to not to get myself to think a little bit less. This is a strategy. There's kind of a lack of propriety. That was the other thing. It's like there's no theme. Like the idea of trying to come up with a theme becomes almost ridiculous in this particular scenario. The theme could be trying to render as many different things as I can possibly do. Yeah, so that was an interesting test for myself. It was also, it trained me a lot about composition, and from that you can like enjoy something from close up and far away at the same time. The far away, it appears as a kind of fire, billowing fire. That's the way I see it. Whereas close up, you've got some of the intricate details that's going on. Up close and personal.
Yeah, that was interesting. A lot of things happening in this work. Yeah, I noticed there are a lot of text. You use a lot of text in your work. Can you explain the role of text in it?
Yeah, for me, I mean, it was kind of verboten, like totally forbidden in my undergrad to, well, not totally forbidden, but like they were really cautioning us using text. But I hadn't heard of Basquiat yet, so I think Basquiat changed my view of text. And I love the way, like talking about Joyce, where it's very elevated and kind of surreal, like I'm playing with your mind. This is like, I like the beautiful naivety, the way that he just kind of attacks these different pieces. It's very energetic. The fact that he probably didn't filter all that much. I mean, he does, but like you see when he filters, he crosses it out, right? You see in some of these pieces. There's a very conscientious filtering going on. But you can tell that he's not doing a whole lot of that beforehand. Like, and he's using text formally as well. The fact that words on a page take up space. They become part of the piece. And I like that. I like this kind of scrawl, the kind of slightly off-kilter scrawl. He doesn't make the same letter twice. There's a variation within it. And it also plays into this, I love Basquiat also because it's a puzzle. Like you look at the text here and you're just like, Alexander the Great, okay. What does that have to do with Jersey Joe Walcott, 2004, liver and lungs? like it kind of stretches your mind to try to recreate the reality he was in when he tried to create this. And it's the other thing about Basquiat is intensely autobiographical. The more you know about Basquiat, the more it all like everything kind of makes sense, and you start to see the way he creates this process is very. He's surrounded by all kinds of different stimuli at the same time. Like he's watching the TV, he's got his book out, he's like listening to the radio sometimes. Like his work is showing this embarrassment of riches that the culture brings to you, like, or an overstimulation, depending how you look at it. But I like what he has to say, or maybe he's basically calling attention to the incredible richness of culture. And I just like the pure and raw energy that's going on in his work. That he can't hold it in. This kind of, or the foolishness of youth, or whatever you want to call it. I just love the fact that he's just like, I gotta make. And I love the fact that some of the pieces he's like, well, I'm not gonna go right to the edge. Like I'm just gonna. This is an image within here. The way he treats his edges is very interesting. And when he colors over certain portions. Yeah, so that basically sums up my interest in Basquiat.
I know you're doing some more. Recently, you're doing some experiments on your work. Can you talk about like what you're doing right now or recently?
Oh, thank you for that question, because, well, I did a little. So these areas where he kind of blocks out, I was kind of interested. I was doing some research. I found this guy, Ruprecht von Kaufmann, and he's doing this cool thing where he does this kind of very expressive mark, and then the character of his pictorial style changes within that mark. You know, you kind of see the relationship to the page, and then you get this close-up of this intricately painted scene. I like the intimacy that you kind of feel like you're zooming in like a microscope, or like the way he sections off certain parts. I love the way that he almost codifies certain areas of the piece, and I'm going to try to figure out how to do that a little bit. I've tried it here a little bit, working with zebras and stripes. Did a little experiment on the way, and cats and mice, and I'm trying to play with different representations of cats, and kind of, I don't know, I feel like there's a mouse in jail, and the cats are like, I'm trying to play with not like cartoonizing, but kind of the cat in this particular case. Like trying to mix a sense of expressionism with the abstraction that comes with cartoon way of speaking. That like you start to relate to things a whole lot better, or you relate to things more better when they're heavily abstracted. Like cartoons, you feel like you have a more one-to-one relationship with the cartoon character. But if it's enfleshed in physical reality, with all the particulars, the scars, if it's clearly rendered, then you don't empathize as clearly. So that's something I'm kind of playing with here.
It has also the concept of being not finished, kind of like.
I'm trying to play with that too, because I'm noticing, I'm like, man, I like this piece, and I like the fact that, you know, is it finished, is it not? It's kind of question mark that's hanging in the air, right? I'm trying to reach the insight, trying to reach the point where you feel like I can explain what I'm doing, and then trying to leave it and sit there for a bit and give it some time and say, well, how would I improve this piece? It's this point in the piece where it becomes like, whatever I would do would be an altering and not a total recreation. The point, I'm interested in that point where you're kind of fixing and editing as opposed to adding. And for me, that's an interesting point. And so, yeah, this one has that too, where it's like working with triangular shapes. Could I have taken those triangular shapes and sort of smeared them around across the piece? Perhaps. It's hard to say. Who knows? That's the point where I was like, okay, I'm going to let that one sit a little bit.
Do you have any like chief goals at this stage, specifically about the idea of games in your work?
With games, I think I would like to go a little deeper in the rabbit hole, like write down my analysis and bring in that form of text onto two-dimensional surface. I think I would like to bring that as a layer and work more with layering. Definitely work with the kind of vellum, that kind of material, and mixing paper mediums. I think that's the way I would like to go. The thing I like about the plasticky or vellum or what's that rock paper called again? Hareskin. I like the smeariness of it, so maybe that's a good place for my drawing. I can mix some smearing into potentially some pieces, and then I can work with layering, and I think there's a lot to be done with layering. So I've got some ideas for sure.
Okay. I know you work a lot about Joyce. Do you think you're done with it?
No, absolutely not. He's got. I got to finish the book. I mean, whatever that means. I've got to finish the wake. But I would like to get to a point where I can re-render some of his stuff in a different way, and play, because I think his word usage, there's a beauty. I think Joyce really opens me up to like the kind of layers of beauty that an art form can take on. He does that with literature, and I feel like, you know, it's possible to try to co-opt that, catch that creativity and try to use that way of thinking and bring it somehow to the image, the realms of images. And that will be an interesting challenge to try to do that as I go, and I feel like vellum might be a way, or more see-through substance might be a way of accessing that, I think. So that's something that's I feel like is on the bucket list in the near future for sure.
Thank you. I think we have some time if anybody has questions.
Well, I thought about making games, but I haven't thought about making concept. I mean, that's definitely an interesting idea for sure. I haven't given it an adequate amount of thought. So that's a good idea. Yeah, I mean, on what I was kind of thinking about working with the kind of puzzle aspect, I would like to play around with where somehow the meaning is veiled. Like I had an idea of like you don't have the artist statement, you have people guess what the meaning would possibly be. It's a little bit. I mean, you just get people to really like maybe have a little raffle. Put in a guess, see what happens. It might create a really interesting thing, and there's like people will talk, try to puzzle it out, make it really, really hard to understand. See some kind of crazy harebrained like guesses. I would love to see that. So. Well, the way I think about games is kind of the way that I frame. It's the framing, the kind of interior reality that I have to put myself in order to be creative. So I'm speaking about games in the sense of, or so far on this talk at least, about a way of restricting what you're trying to do within a series of experiments. Because sometimes I find it difficult to get to that point where, like, it's an important part of my creative process, I think, to restrict, to give myself an area to play within. And perhaps that's true of other artists, I don't know. I mean, to a certain extent it seems so, but.
Well, it seems to me this is one thing that as you were showing each scene, to me it looks very illustrative. Like, why is he choosing to illustrate exactly something he read about there? Isn't it more about the kind of putting together the kind of fantasies or creations that I see in conceptual? But yet, when I saw you bring all those drawings together, it became, because we lost that one-to-one relationship with the book, it became go back, it becomes this whole other world.
Yeah, I mean, and that was part of the existential problem reading through the wake, is that you feel groundless. And perhaps some of that comes into the imagery. I mean, for me, it was an interesting experiment wherein I've got a whole plan that I'm trying to execute, and then each particular page is some books from the wake that I'm trying to reinterpret. So it's kind of becomes the machine, the thing that helps me to produce, the way to structure my working process. So trying to illustrate, it became a jumping off point. I think for someone to come up to it and say, "Oh, you're clearly talking about the wake," that I can't possibly assume that there's no way. So yeah.
Why would that be important? Aren't you trying to get to the same kind of place in your psyche?
The structuralist kind of?
That you're trying to find a way into your unconscious.
Yeah. I mean, in a sense, this does show part of the, because I'm still filtering it. I have to be incredibly selective in the reading of it. And it's not like he's talking about, maybe I'm not fully understanding the question. I'm trying to,
Other image where you were saying it looked like building fire or something.
yeah. This one here.
That one.
Yeah.
It made in the same way.
No, this was all the drawings were done beforehand, and I assembled them at once, and then I connected them so that I made them all work together, kind of. Well, I did this one before I did the other one, so it's a little anachronistic, this slide. I did this one first because I just wanted to see what would happen. Did it bring me to a similar place? I mean, no, the whole process was different for this one. Some of these were drawings that took the year before. So that was another curveball. Whereas these were, the structure of the process was definitely planned out. This is the way I'm going to do it, and this is how I'm going to achieve it, and so forth. So this was a conscious, it was a conscious, planned out part of the process, I would say. That's did it feel the same way? I don't remember exactly how it felt. I haven't really thought about that, but yeah. Sort of.
But like when I look at something like this kind of work, it almost has a different kind of flow. Whereas I think one of the things that we talked about in the past is the continuity of flow, the consistency of the way that you visually allow for that
Yeah.
and make it like straight.
Yeah.
And I think this is a constant competition because I wonder if it's my mind is just like a contradiction of where the economy goes by having those kind of sort of strict impositions on the way that you kind of your creative work. Whereas these start to loosen up in a very different way.
Yeah. There's this, by leaving things unfinished, you allow more. Well, the composition. Yeah.
It's not completely just that it's open.
Yeah, it's open-ended. It's kind of, it ends with a question. It doesn't end with a statement.
Feel to it, like even that area behind the cat, seeing this again.
Yeah.
I love those kind of strange lines. And then you've got that kind of flow behind the rat, and the rat's more dramatic, and the other sort of between black and white. It just has
Yeah.
And then it releases that kind of rhythm.
Yeah. Yeah, but within an individual piece. It's something happens when you create a series, and you take it, and that's what happened, I think, in some cases. We talked about this too, where when you work on a large scale and you start assembling pieces, you do get this, the similarities come out in full force, right?
Well, also because it starts to build up that continuity. I think actually it's the opposite. That
Yeah.
it starts to be something more in keeping with this stream of consciousness that
Yeah, there's kind of a congested madness that's going on in this piece.
But I think the abstract kind of mark making and really experimenting with down kind of tools and materials and different ways of making marks would be another way to get into that kind of spontaneous dream state.
Yeah, like these were done on some very disposable pieces of cardboard. So that gets me away from like, yeah, I think there's something about it for sure that you get in a different headspace when you're thinking finish it, must look good, must go up here, must go, like, and I think I have to find a way of tricking myself into being more disposable to some extent.
With your way of coming up with pictures and names, that's where I think you use the game to make yourself experiment.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of experimentation to be done.
Where do you see yourself going in the next 4 months? How do you see this unfolding in your direction?
Well, I would like to work on some bigger pieces. I would like to work on pieces like that are like this scale, something like that. Worker with a different process in mind. So being conscious of the beginning to end kind of thing. Bigger mark making, transparency. Some of it I don't know, and I have to take it. Yeah, I feel like vellum's my next move, and playing with the different possibilities. Sorry, I can't speak more specifically, but I have a few ideas I would like to put to work. I'd like to maybe full areas of abstraction or areas where I kind of just like ruthlessly go in a certain direction for a little while, trying to combine and juxtapose different aspects on the same piece and see what happens. Just try some. I'm trying to get better at getting in that space of full-on experimentation. So that's a learning process. And you learn a lot about yourself when you're trying to be uncomfortable.
Do you have more questions? Thank you. Thank you everyone for coming, and thanks, Aaron.
Well, thank you all for showing up. Alrighty. Yeah.